streamed live to YouTube, and the video will be published
I started
afterward.
recording, yeah.
Which means that if you do not want your face or voice on any of those, please turn off your video and your mic, or I think you will be muted automatically from one of us, I believe. Yeah, anyway, so we will be starting the recording in just a second.
Yeah. Oh, the YouTube live stream will be set up soon. All
right.
Wait a second. Why is it not working? Interesting.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. That was our experience with streaming on YouTube as well.
Oh, no, I have it. Okay, all good. Wait a second. Go live. YouTube, Breakout Berlin with Tom Greever and Jeff Gothelf, and then I can go live. Then it takes like 5 minutes for little YouTube minions to connect everything and make it run. And then we are live on YouTube, and I can share the link here as well, and you can also share it with your friends and say like, well, hey,
Look, Mom, I'm on TV.
Look, Mom, I'm on YouTube. So we will all become YouTubers today. So here's the link. Live stream is on. Cool. And yeah, so we are good to go.
Excellent. Maybe one more housekeeping item. Can anyone who knows Zoom turn off the waiting room so that people can join directly? Or because I keep clicking.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, Henning is the bouncer.
All right. Cool.
Okay, so just let me say a couple of words how this whole thing started. I'm Thomas, and I'm one of the co-organizers, co-founders of UX Product Munich. And recently I started a new job as lead for product innovation growth strategy at Xing Events. And Mirella approached me on LinkedIn and said, well, congrats, we were discussing about Xing Events because she does a lot of events in Berlin and in Germany about product. And then I said, well, I also do some stuff and events around product. We do this UX and Product Meetup. Then she said, well, we did some webinar online sessions already with our community. I said, well, we are planning. And then I was just thinking, in those virtual meetup times, why not just connect us both and make a joint venture out of it? Both of our communities have equally sized, so we have 2,000 something people, they have 2,000 something people, and say, okay, I bring a speaker, you bring a speaker, and we will set this thing up. So I got in touch with Tom. Recently, I was following him on LinkedIn, and he was also speaking at Push conference for a while. And he said, yeah, I'm doing some workshops here. Can you like spread the word? I said, for sure, but you can spread the word yourself. If you join our meetup, then he joins. Then I tell Mirella, well, we have Tom Greever. Then there was some other speaker planned. And suddenly Mirella said, wait a second, if you bring Tom Greever, I will bring Jeff Gothelf. And I was like, what? So suddenly this whole thing exploded, and it was just not a some local product guys talking about some stuff. So we just have the almighty Jeff Gothelf and Tom Greever up in this thing. So that was quite fun. So maybe Mirella, you want to say some words about product people?
All right, so this is a series of events. Anil and myself organize in Berlin. Our meetups usually have about 70–80% product people and functions that either want to go into product or interface a lot with that. So it'd be engineering managers, developers, product design, and of course, UI, UX, whichever flavor. And we usually have 2 or 3 talks in more of a TED style talk. And I thought this was a great opportunity for us to try a new format and have 2 very cool book authors together. So thanks. I think Jeff got initially in contact with Anil. So that would be Anil for to credit for bringing Jeff along. So thanks a lot, guys. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing your talks.
Awesome. Awesome.
Cool.
So as a quick warm-up session, or what was, I think,
before we get into that, cool. Yeah, thanks for the intro. So 1 or 2 more housekeeping items first, since we already got the legal disclaimer out of the way. First of all, if you want to back channel with a little more fidelity than what Zoom gives you, join us on Slack. uxandproduct.com/join will give you an invite link to Slack. Everyone is welcome, regardless of whether they are from Munich or Berlin or elsewhere, really. Cool. And then the second housekeeping item here. So this event has been made a lot easier on our wallets because we have a supporter in Freeletics. So big shout out. They are supporting the event by covering our Zoom licenses and also other costs, and thereby help make it all possible. Freeletics is one of the fastest growing health and fitness startups in Europe, and actually one of the few startups that are hiring during these times. And right now, there are 2 positions open that I think will be interesting for the folks here. One is for a product manager to drive the AI coaching aspect of their product, and the other one for a director of product to drive the overall vision and strategy. So for more information on that, head over to freeletics.com and find the link to the careers page in the footer. And with that, we are ready to get to the content part. And this is where I'll turn it over to Thomas for the intro session.
Quick intro session. We before we start with the talks, we will do a quick breakout session then. But there will be mainly Tom Greever starting first, and then Jeff Gothelf afterwards, and both have 20 minutes of their time to speak mostly about the books. I would like to have a quick kind of like onboarding session, which will involve every one of us here. So I will quickly share my screen so you see what this thing is all about and how it will go down. So basically, I've created a board in Miro, which is the world map, as you can see. And I would like all of you, I will share the link soon, so you will have guest edit access. So please go here, grab a sticky note and put it somewhere on the map with your name on it, the place where you would love to be right now if there would be no travel restriction and anything. So your favorite place on earth where you would like to be right now. So for my side, I would love to be somewhere here in Sardinia. That's one of my favorite spots. So I put myself here, right, Thomas. And then in Miro, there's icon finder. So you can put any icons, like, I don't know, I like to hang out at the beach or having a cocktail. Couple of Negronis, that would be nice. So you can put it here. And then we will have a breakout session afterwards, so people can network, and we can use this to exchange and discuss where you placed yourself and so on. So I will make this a public thing. They have this guest edit as a beta version out there for 2 weeks or so, which is pretty awesome. So I can copy that and post it to the link chat if I can find it.
We'll have a breakout session afterwards, so people can network, and we can use this to exchange and discuss where you placed yourself and so on. So
I think we have a feedback loop there. If everyone would be so kind to turn off their microphones, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Where you would like to be right now. So here's the link in the chat. Oh, wait a second. It was privately to Henning. Of course, that makes so much sense. So here's the public link again. So I assume there will be a couple of pointers in there in a second. We can already see some people joining. So yeah, go ahead. The map is locked, so please don't unlock it. And go over here, grab yourself a sticky note, put yourself on the map with your name, maybe pick an icon, and put yourself wherever you would like to be right now if there would be no travel restrictions. Oh, I see Henrik. Hi, Henrik. Wait a second, what is your... Tom Greever is supposed to be in London this week. Is this correct, Tom?
Yeah, UX London was supposed to be next week, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I was actually going to be in Europe the whole month of May.
Uh-huh. Did they try to turn it into a virtual event?
Yeah, yes, and postponing it and changing it, and it's hard to keep up with.
Oh, yeah, I was also following Business to Buttons in Sweden, and first they also tried to switch to virtual, but then at some point they just ditched it and say next year. Republica will do a virtual one, by the way, in Berlin. I mean, virtually in Berlin. Oh, we have a lot of people going crazy in Japan. Interesting, guys.
Thomas?
India, yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but could you please show again how you find the icons, because I can't.
Oh, the icons here is I can find her.
Oh, I think for people who haven't logged into Miro, it's in the 3 dots menu in the toolbar.
Thank you.
Oh, maybe. Okay.
Yes.
Maybe down there. Good point. Yeah, there's icon finder, and then you can put anything you want there. Okay.
Just a short question to Katrin, for example. She wrote there's an audio problem. Is this still apparent?
Not to me.
That's solved, okay.
Okay. So that's funny. I'm getting notifications from Miro that something's going on my board, and I should watch out for it. Fun. I think activity is slowing down a little bit, so I would take it back to Zoom and start a breakout session. So we have 90 participants here. I think in order to make it a nice round of talking to people, let's make 22 rooms. Will be like 4 to 5 participants per room. I will create a breakout room right now, and then you have a couple of minutes to exchange about it, to kind of like network, say hello to the other guys in your room, and please share your experiences and where you put yourself on the map, and exchange about it until we will all get back here. Okay, so see you soon. I will make it a group chat for 7 minutes. Should be enough of time, and Yeah, let's go. It's a question where I want to join. So there's 7, 9, 10. And I will probably join those guys here.
Yeah.
All right.
Hello. Back again. So everyone's back?
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's hand it over to Tom. I hope you had all a good time. And Thomas, it's your turn now. To go ahead, I prepared some questions we can go through and ask the audience. Just let me know when you want to shoot it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, my presentation will actually be relatively short so that we have plenty of time to chat and discuss afterwards.
Okay.
And then, yeah, Thomas, whenever you want to shoot out those polls is entirely at your discretion. But I wanted to take a few minutes just to kind of set up the idea here and help you understand where this all came from for me. Early in my career as a designer, I began noticing that some of the designers I worked with were just better at explaining their design decisions. And they were much more successful in their careers, maybe even more successful than others who may have been even more talented at design. And so those experiences led me to try to really understand, evaluate, and maybe even systematize my own ability to articulate design decisions to the other people that I worked with, so that I could succeed at delivering the best experience for both the users and customers of my products, as well as the stakeholders in our business. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that your ability to be thoughtful and articulate your solution to any problem is more important than your ability to create the perfect solution every time, because you could have the most innovative product in the world, but if you aren't able to effectively communicate to the people who hold the keys to your success and get their support, then your product is never going to see the light of day. So for our time together today, I just want to share several stories with you in 3 important areas where I've learned to be a better communicator of design. So I had a guy named James who worked for me several years ago. He was young, enthusiastic designer building a brand new platform to serve his community. And he had great ideas. He was a super smart guy because his user-centered design approach taught him to always put that user first, right? He was also kind of arrogant. He thought his ideas were the best, maybe even like the only ideas. And so when people would raise questions or provide criticism, he became defensive, right? The stakeholders don't understand, he would think, or you're not the user, he would tell them. And there was one particularly memorable case where he actually told an executive that they were just too old and they didn't understand modern design patterns. So because James didn't address their concerns, our stakeholders saw his explanations as just excuses, right? Maybe even insults, right, to their character. Well, in the end, James lost his job. So he had good intentions, and he was a great designer who had empathy for his users, but he had no empathy for the people who held the keys to his success. He lost their support, and as a result, his work never had the opportunity to help the people in his community like he wanted it to. After he was let go, I took over the project, and I tried my best to address people's concerns, but I was eventually able to get support for the project again simply by managing the conversation better, even though I was technically producing less than James had in his full-time role. Now, that's a really unfortunate story, but I think it demonstrates what I believe is a key ingredient missing from a lot of designers, product people's skill sets, right? The ability to empathize with the needs and expectations of our stakeholders and our partners in the business. If we really expect to communicate effectively with them, we need to use the same skills that we already use in identifying with our users and our customers. So one of the more significant realizations that I've had is this idea that we're not actually seeking the approval of our work in these conversations, but we're preparing our stakeholders for their own meetings and their own conversations. I'll give you 2 examples from recent history for me. in one of my very, very first jobs as a designer, I had a manager who would take our design work and present it to an executive team every week in a room with other managers from sales and marketing and customer service. But the pattern was always the same. She would come back to meet with all of us designers and had changes no matter what. We'd make the changes and the cycle would start all over again. But in the process, it felt like much of my well-intentioned thought and effort was being thrown out. Now, I had good reasons for doing why I did what I did. And it just seemed like those reasons were never respected in the process. So I told her this and she suggested I come to the next meeting myself. What I found was that this meeting was just a free-for-all where anyone was just riffing on my work. Now, since I was there this time, I was able to explain my decisions and some of those opinions faded. So you could argue, certainly, that my manager failed by allowing a meeting like that to inform our design process, and that's true. But what I learned was that if I could do a better job of giving her the right vocabulary and understanding about my designs, she was much more likely to go into that meeting, represent my work in a way that fostered agreement instead, right? But if I didn't give her the confidence that she really understood my work, she was apt to just give in to all the feedback that came her way. On another project, more recently, I was a consultant and my client was the director of engineering, and we were designing an internal facing tool for his team to use at his company. So because he was an engineer, he didn't have experience with product teams, and I was sure to be upfront about our process, how we would start with kind of understanding the problems and business cases and create user flows and eventually transition that thinking into design assets, wireframes, mockups. He agreed to this process in writing, but every week he complained that we weren't getting enough done, right? Where are the designs, he would ask. I'd remind him of our process and he would agree again and we would move on. But a month in, he got really mad. He said, "You guys have been working for a month and you haven't done anything." Well, I was shocked. I mean, he had been involved in every stand-up, he'd approved every user flow, he'd even given us feedback on them. Where are the designs, he would ask. So from his perspective, he had hired us to create designs for this app and he didn't think we were delivering. And in the course of that conversation, he actually admitted, every week I go to my senior leadership meeting and I've got to show progress, and every week you give me nothing to show. Now, this wasn't actually true. We always gave him something to show, but we didn't even know about this meeting. And it revealed that he was not confident in his ability to present things like user flows, right? We'd done a poor job of giving him what he needed to represent our work and be successful in that area. Now, did he actually care about the designs? Probably, but what he also cared about was looking good to his peers and superiors in a weekly meeting that we didn't know about, right? So realizing that he had a personal goal, right? That it was as much about showing progress to his bosses. It allowed us to shift our priorities so that every week we were sure to give him something that he could confidently present as if it was his own work. So this means that we're giving them the tools and the vocabulary they need to go represent our work to other people in the organization. Because if we can give them that confidence to really represent our work well, if they really understand our thinking enough to talk to someone else about it, then they're likely to approve it just as a byproduct, right? And I think sometimes our thinking on this is backwards. We go in trying to get their approval, when really what we need to do is go in and set them up for success by giving them the tools and the vocabulary and the same shared understanding that they'll need to represent our work to other people who are outside of our team. I love to write things down. So I love to just summarize my thoughts on a conversation, to try to distill a complicated idea down to a few words. And I do this for my own benefit. It helps me by removing those things from my own mental capacity. It's also self-preservation because I can create a record of things that happen and refer back to them when questions come up. And so my notes always serve as a guide for me. And I don't even ascribe to one particular tool or method for creating notes and documentation. But what I've found is that this is a crucial part of how I communicate within teams. Two stories to talk through that a little bit. I was serving as the leader on a product team with about 4 or 5 people, and we reported to the director of UX. I was on this project for 18 months inside one of the biggest companies in the United States. And during those 18 months, the company had 3 major reorgs, and my director on this project changed 3 times in 18 months. Every time our new director would come in and look at our work and ask the same obvious questions that the last person asked too. Well, why didn't we do it this way, right? So fortunately, I had created a detailed set of documentation from our weekly meetings with a brief explanation of not only the choices that we made, but also some understanding of why we made those choices, an explanation of why we did what we did, right? And in one case, I was actually able to go back 3 months in my notes to find the meeting where we made a decision in order to help our new leaders understand why we were here so that we could avoid repeating the same conversation and move on with the project. In another role, I was leading 2 different teams, and I was involved in several meetings to review their work, and it felt like I was repeating myself to people. I was also overbooked with meetings, and they seemed to generate, you know, a lot of the same kinds of questions and reactions from people. So to save time, I started recording a weekly video, less than 10 minutes long, often only 5 minutes long, where I shared my screen and I reviewed all the work that my teams were delivering. It was quick and dirty. There was no editing. I just would write up a brief outline in Evernote to guide my thoughts and talk through it. I'd open all the tabs in my browser so I could just click through them in the right order. And then I would take that video and post it to the general channel in Slack so that everyone in the company could see it. And that simple 10-minute weekly exercise completely transformed my meetings and conversations. What used to feel like hours of the same stuff turned into shorter status updates, and it allowed us to focus more on the next things that were coming instead of just the current things that we're working on now. People in different parts of the organization suddenly had confidence in me and my team and what we were doing without the need to get into our process, right? And then within a month, our CEO asked all the other VPs to start doing the same thing so that we could see these little short snippets of updates from the other parts of the business. So creating that accessible place where anyone in the organization has visibility into what I'm working on has always created benefits. And it makes sense, right? I mean, people tend to fear what they don't know. They may assume the worst about something they don't understand. But when you open your process and your thinking to the people involved, when you give them access to actually see it for themselves, then suddenly people will have confidence in you and your team. So I share these 3 stories with you because as product and design leaders, I think we tend to focus a little too much on the deliverables, right? Whether it's a Gantt chart or a roadmap, a user flow or design assets, right? We tend to think that those are the things that are important. And yes, those things are absolutely part of our job. But our real job is actually this, right? The job is about communication. Our real job is to take all the different parts and pieces we see and connect them in a way that makes sense to the other people in our organizations. I have often likened this to solving for a Rubik's Cube, because what happens is someone comes in and goes, hey, I want my side to be red. If you just turn this here, then that'll make my side red. And we have to be so attuned to all the parts and pieces and the connections with our products and the way our designs affect one another that we can say, yes, I love red. I want that side to be red too, but you need to understand when I turn this here, it affects the other sides and I've got to solve for the whole cube. Because without their support, we don't really have a job at all, right? We need to see our roles in these conversations, not as just being there to receive feedback, right? Not even necessarily to get their approval, but instead to be a facilitator of a conversation on design solutions, to look for their support, maybe even in the face of disagreement, to guide that conversation to a happy place. And when you begin to see that as your primary role, as a role where you become the connective tissue between all the different parts of the organization, then it'll help you remember that your stakeholders are people too, that they represent our work to other parts of the organization. And when we give them visibility into us and our process, it gives them the confidence that we know what we're doing. So I consider these skills to be really critical to our roles as designers and product leaders. So we can continue the discussion now so that hopefully we can be better at communicating with stakeholders, keep our sanity, and still deliver the best user experience. So that's the end of my presentation. Thomas, do you want to take us into our discussion time now?
Yeah, sure. Before we go into discussion, maybe we can quickly go through the polls, because I asked Tom upfront if he has like some questions to the community. So I would just quickly pull up some polls, and I would say they're quite fun. And in the meantime, you can also think already about some questions you would love to ask Tom and put it in the chat for everyone to see, and then I can forward this and handpick it and put it to Tom. We are also on our Slack channel I'm watching this one closely, and you can post it also there. So yeah, just first question, Tom came up, and this is a poll to anyone. Which stakeholders do you find it most challenging to talk with about design? So please put your vote here.
Yeah, so while everyone is doing that, I'll answer Mateo's question in the chat. Yes. Do I think that our work is something like creating a community? Sure. I think that design advocacy inside our teams and our organizations is a critical part of elevating the level of design maturity in organizations and helping people participate in and understand our process such that they don't feel the need quite so much, I think, to push back, right? The reason that a lot of disagreements and misunderstandings happen is because people they often don't understand design. They don't necessarily see the business value of design in the same way that we do. And so anything we can do to foster that atmosphere where people understand the tools and resources that we use. So yeah, it's partly education, it's partly advocacy, it's partly just about alignment with the leaders in our organizations so that everyone is kind of coming to the table with the same understanding of what the design team's role is in the process.
By the way, while you were talking, the poll has ended, and a significant amount of people, I would say, picked executives. Tom, did you expect this answer?
Yeah, I think these are easily the biggest audience of people that are difficult to communicate with. And one of the reasons is because executives are so involved in many different parts of the organization that we don't have as many opportunities to get to know them, to develop that empathy for them, right? We don't maybe have as many shared experiences with them. Not only that, but a lot of executives are coming in, they're context switching. They just came from one meeting about a completely different product. And we've got to learn to very quickly bring them up to speed with where we are, right? And I've been in executive roles before, and I found that to be the most challenging part, is that I would come to a design review with people who were on my own team, and I would have no idea where we were. What did we talk about last week? What decisions did we make? Right. And so anything you can do to help those people very quickly get up to speed about where we were, where we're going, what your recommendation is. I've seen it happen too often where design teams just kind of show up and go, okay, so this week we're talking about this. No, set the context, right? Remind me where we are in the process, the kinds of feedback you need from me right now, the kinds of feedback that aren't valuable, anything you can do to help people understand the context of this conversation right now is going to go a long way in helping executive roles, especially.
I have a question from the audience here. It's Matteo Graton. Do you think that, did we have this already, that our work would be something like?
Yeah, I answered the one from Matteo.
The one, yeah. Sasha Milinkovic. Don't you think that this has a lot changed as there are more and more design-savvy people in decision-making positions? And that is not that much about convincing anymore, but rather entering a dialogue on eye level.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely ideal. And I see two sides to this. One is that, yes, in organizations that have a higher level of design maturity, it is much easier to understand and get aligned on the problem that we're trying to solve, on allowing design solutions to come at an appropriate level, to involve research, right? Those things are happening more often, so you're right. But I also see a lot of organizations talking a lot about design, believing that they are design-led or that they have a higher level of design maturity than they actually do. And there's not alignment necessarily on design values and what the design brings to the team. And so it's definitely still a challenging, I think, in most organizations.
I have a nice question from Jeff, actually, which is kind of related. And how should UX folks, and also I would say product folks, and especially product folks, who need those facilitation skills, because you're usually in your organization between many different stakeholders you have to manage. C-level, finance here, a CEO on the other hand, COO maybe, and you are just in between and have to justify and get all this kind of stuff together. What can you do to practice or learn those skills?
Yeah, I mean, I think facilitation in particular is one of those things that is better learned by practicing, right? And I think any opportunities you can find to practice leading workshops and classes, you know, volunteering to speak at a meetup like this one is a great way. I've talked to people who've joined things like Toastmasters and what's the name of that 20 seconds per slide thing that's similar where it's yes,
or Ignite Talks. Yeah,
exactly, right. Anything that you can do to practice just presenting a body of content in front of people is going to be really useful in facilitating that conversation. I know on my own team, we try to take turns when it comes to presenting content where I will have someone present a portion of what we're presenting to a client or a stakeholder so that there's less risk for overall, right? And maybe I kind of facilitate overall, but then I will have different people practice for their part, right? And then that way, if there's a mistake, if there's a concern, we can kind of go back and forth. And so, yeah, practice is definitely the biggest one. But I think even for people who are accustomed to facilitating conversations and like that, I think the difficulty and the disconnect often is really taking the time more so to understand your thinking on why you did what you did. I think we may have research to back it up, right? There may be a bit of intuition involved. That's certainly true for, especially if we have a lot of experience kind of in the field. But I think it's important to not expect that you can just show up and wing it, right? We have to be able to have a plan, right? We need to think through why we did what we did so that we can explain it to someone else. And that does involve, you know, practicing with other people. And I will take notes while I'm working on a design. I will actually switch to notes and ask myself questions like, you know, what problem am I trying to solve with this? How is this going to affect the customer? Why is this solution that I have in mind better than the other possible solutions, the other alternatives, right? And just answering some pretty basic questions for yourself in the process will help kind of uncover your thinking so you can express it to someone else.
Okay, I'm just looking at the time. I would say we have tons of questions here. Tom, is it okay for you if I leave you with those questions in the chat?
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
You can pick them and go through it. And also on the side note, on our Slack channel, Tom is also in our Slack workspace later on. So if you have any questions, you can also connect with him on Slack. So thank you very much. Great talk as usual, I would say. Next speaker will be Jeff. Jeff, are you ready to go?
Absolutely. I can share my screen if that's okay. And
awesome.
Happy to get started. Just give me just 1 second.
I also have some polls for you. Should I do it up front or afterwards?
The polls.
There's some questions.
Yeah, the polls are always fun. I tell you what, you can do them after I finish, and that would be great. A couple
awesome.
of quick questions to see how it goes. And so it's funny, I was listening to Tom, and I kept thinking to myself, there's this, I don't even know where it comes from, Tom. It's some American colloquial cliche that from some TV show where they say, and now for something completely different, right? And I don't know where that's from, but it's some cliche American meme from probably 50 years ago. And as I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, that's what was coming into my head. Tom's talking about articulating design decisions. I'm going to talk about this new book that I wrote called Forever Employable, and it's really a career book, and it's got a lot of design thinking in it. It's got a lot of kind of product thinking in it. But as Tom was talking, there's a couple of themes that I wrote down that I think you'll hear as I share my story here that are consistent with the themes that Tom talked about. Specifically, like he talks about articulating your design decisions. He talks about being able to tell a compelling story to the right audience in the right way. What you'll hear me talk about in just a second here is storytelling as a key skill for ensuring a successful and ongoing and kind of forever employable type of career. And then the other thing that I noticed as Tom was speaking, he talked a little bit about creating and owning, creating a vocabulary, and a consistent one at that. And it's one of the things that I may not mention it explicitly in the talk, it's in the book, and as a component of being, as you become a recognized expert in a particular space, speaking about something consistently provides some relationship between you and that vocabulary, and it makes it clear what you're actually saying, because people know that what those words mean when you say them, which is not always the case with a lot of folks. So definitely a lot of similar themes. Let me share with you the themes. So what's really interesting is this was a really challenging book for me to write, because I was terrified to write it. It was something that seemingly was very different from everything that I had done to date. But I'd gotten a lot of inbound requests to really tell the story of how I built the business and the career that I've managed to build for myself over the last 15 or so years. And that's what this book is about. And in the next 18 and a half minutes, I'm going to go through a very, very quick summary of the book, and then I'm happy to take your questions as well. But the story starts on the year that I turned 35. In fact, when I was 35, everything had gone pretty well. I had a job as a UX design manager, 2 little daughters. They're not so little anymore. Married, had a house, a couple of cars, living the American dream. And I wake up on the day of my 35th birthday in a panic. I'm panicking and I can't figure out why. What I realized was that up until that point, I had a pretty good run running up to my 35th birthday. If you look at my career from the beginning, I started off as a broke musician. I did that for a while, played piano in bands, didn't make any money in the 90s. And then the internet happened. Yay, internet, right? And the internet allowed me to get a job, because in 1999, if you could spell HTML, you could get a job in the internet. And I could do a little bit more than spell HTML. I could actually code, mark it up at least, and do a little bit of graphic design. And so I started working at this company called IXL. And then shortly thereafter, I read this book. This book changed my life. It's Information Architecture for the World Wide Web. And it's now in its 4th edition, but this was the 1st edition. We're talking about 1999, 2000 at this point. And I decided that I was going to become an information architect because it moved me up the waterfall, right? So with the work I was doing as a front-end developer, I wasn't really developing anything, but just doing markup, and graphic design was at the end of the waterfall, and I wanted to move up the waterfall. And so information architecture felt like it would take me up, and it did. And then, not unlike the pandemic to some extent, the dot-com bubble burst and all the jobs went away. And I bounced around for a lot of years, kind of trying to keep employed, keep paying the bills, feeding my kids, etc. I worked at AOL for a long time, America Online. I got a job at Web Trends on the East Coast. And then I ended up back in New York in the mid-2000s at a company called The Ladders as the Director of User Experience. And in 10 years or so of working, I'd clawed my way up to middle management, right? Woohoo, made it to middle management, right? And this is kind of when I'm waking up. It's my 35th birthday. I wake up and I'm paranoid, and I'm terrified and I'm paranoid. And my realization is this, is that in 5 years, when I turn 40, which is kind of funny, looking at it from this side of 40, but back then the number 40 was pretty terrifying. When I turned 40, I was expecting to be overpaid and unemployable, because what I was seeing all of these younger designers coming into the industry, and they were smarter, faster, better than me, hungrier than me, and most importantly at that case, they were cheaper than me. And I was really afraid that in 5 years I was going to be old, overpaid, and unemployable. And I was terrified about that because, well, you saw how cute my kids were, and those cute kids need to eat, right? So I had to feed them every single day. And so on the morning of my 35th birthday, I made a resolution to myself. I resolved that I was never going to look for jobs again. I was going to stop looking for jobs, and that jobs were going to look for me. I wasn't going to play that game where you go and you send your CV, your resume in, and then you apply and you go through the interviews. I wasn't going to go through that. Jobs were going to look for me, which I recognize is a fairly mind-blowing statement, right? Woo-hoo, right? Kind of fantastic, right? But there's a lot of other questions to answer when you make that kind of resolution. And for me, there were four. I said those words to myself, and I resolved that to myself. But there were four questions that I needed to answer right away. First and foremost, the year's 2008, right? Does anyone know who I am? That's a good question, because I don't think so. I don't think anybody knew who I was, right? And so how do I make myself more present in the industry? Why would people look for me? What problem would I help them solve, right? If you think of that, like what is my unique value proposition? How would they find me? Right? So yeah, it's 2008, we've got the internet, but realistically, how are people going to find me? And then ultimately, if all of this works, right, people can find me, they know who I am, they offer me work, what kind of work do I want? In other words, what kind of work do I want to attract? I don't want to get just any jobs thrown at me. I want to get specific work that I want to do. And so I set out to answer these questions. And to be clear, I've spent it says the next 10 plus years, it's the last 10 plus years building a platform to answer those questions and start to build this career where I believe I've become forever employable. And what I've learned over that time period is that I believe there are at least 5 qualities that you need to have to become forever employable. And in my story, there are 5 steps that I took to get there. And if you add all that stuff up, it boils down to this. I believe you have to treat your career, your growth, and your professional development as a product, as a thing that you are launching and continuously improving over time. And I want to share with you specific examples of each one of these things very quickly, and then I'll take your questions, right? So what are the 5 qualities to becoming forever employable? I believe you need to have at least these 5 qualities to be forever employable. There's entrepreneurialism, there's self-confidence, there's continuous learning, there's improvement, a sense of improvement, and reinvention. And if this sounds familiar to any of you, it should, because these are the fundamental principles that underlie agile product development, lean startup, design thinking, product thinking, right? These are the same kind of qualities that make our products successful, and they should make ourselves successful as well. And as I went through these as I was writing the book, I was thinking, well, these are the qualities that I think you need, and where in my life have I exhibited these qualities? And entrepreneurialism was the toughest one, because I've never seen myself as an entrepreneur. I was an execution guy, not really an ideas guy. But as I went through my life's experience, right, being in a band is being an entrepreneur. If you've ever been in a band, like a serious band that tried to actually make it, be rock stars, right? It's a startup. You've got crazy ideas. You've got to bring people along. You've got to collaborate. You've got to iterate. You've got to market yourself. And you've got a limited runway, because when that money runs out, you're getting a real job. That's how that works. And that's usually how that plays out. Self-confidence was really interesting, right? I'd never really told my story about anything. But the thing that I realized, that the stories that I did have, nobody else had, right? So even though it felt like everything had been written and talked about, even in the early 2000s, about everything in the UX world and the product world, nobody had my story. And I had opportunities to take bits and pieces of my personal and professional life and share that. For example, and I've started telling these stories over the last few years. One of the things that really taught me self-confidence was the time that I spent in the circus. I spent 6 months on the road with the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus right after university. It was a gig that terrified me at the time. I did it anyway, and I learned to survive, and I learned to make friends, and I learned to thrive in what is arguably bananas environment. Just super crazy kind of thing, right? And that helped me build my self-confidence. One of the things that we talk about in our product development work is continuous learning. How do you apply that to your professional development? Well, you read and you speak with others and you engage in communities like this, and you experiment with new ideas and you see what takes hold, right? And as you build that learning, right, then they teach you where you need to improve in your career as a designer, as a product manager, as an engineer, whatever it is. And it's that drive that leads to this sense of enthusiastic skepticism, a phrase that I learned watching a TED Talk by Astra Teller. And enthusiastic skepticism is the sense that I could always make things better. I could always be better at this skill. And again, whether it's designing, being a product manager, articulating your design decisions, right? Whatever it is, I can always get better. And it's one of those things that I always strive to do, is to make myself better. One of the ways that I continuously do that is I collaborate with others. The photo that's on the screen right now is from a workshop that I teach with Jeff Patton. He and I teach together 6 times a year, and I learn from him. And hopefully, I hope he learns something from me, and I get better at my job, which is teaching these workshops. And then the last quality is this idea of reinvention. It's this understanding, and this is something that I teach my clients all the time, is that what got you here won't get you there, right? At least not the technical skills. And so how do you take what you're good at and what you know and expand it or move it to an adjacent market? One of the things that I've been doing is taking the ideas behind design thinking and product thinking and just customer centricity, product development, and bringing them to non-product teams like legal, finance, human resources. And this is something that is helping me reinvent myself continuously, so that there's always new people who are being exposed to my ideas, and they're coming and they're speaking with me. Now, those are the 5 qualities, and I recognize I'm moving quickly. I'm happy to take questions. The steps that I took to get to where I am today, these are the 5 steps that got me to to the place where I am today. And it's planting a flag, telling your story, sound familiar, right? Following the new path, teaching, and then giving it all away. And I'll show you some really quick examples of each one of these as well. Planting a flag means deciding where you're going to create a platform around yourself. What is the area that you've decided to own, right? Maybe it's UX, maybe it's design, maybe it's design leadership, maybe it's product management in healthcare, maybe it's product leadership, right? Maybe it could be 1,000 different things, but where are you going to put your flag? And the interesting thing is that the people who have done this well, you know exactly where they planted their flag. Let me show you some examples. I mean, if I had time for kind of call and response from the audience, I would do it, but we'll move quickly, right? Eric Ries, right? Where did Eric Ries plant his flag? Everybody knows, right? Lean startup, that was his thing. He did that for years, right? My buddy Jake Knapp, right? Where did he plant his flag? Design sprints. The almighty product management guru, Marty Kagan, right? And you know where he planted his flag, product management, right? For me, right, where I decided to plant my flag was Lean UX, bringing Agile and UX together, because I had that experience. I was working on a team, I was leading a team that was struggling with this, and I had good stories to share. So I decided that that's where I was gonna plant my flag, which leads me to step number 2 in my process, which is telling your story, storytelling, again, articulating. And for me, this came with practice. Like Tom talked about facilitation from practice, same thing. I didn't know how to give a talk. I didn't know how to tell my story. I practiced anywhere and everywhere that I could. Meetups, conferences, brown bag lunches at work, anybody who would listen, I would tell the story. And I started telling this is 2.5 years now after my 35th birthday, is when I gave the first talk about Agile and UX ever, that I'd ever given. It was at the Agile conference. This is a decade ago at this point. And then a month later in Paris, 2.5 years after my 35th birthday, it's the first Lean UX talk happens in Paris. And then a few months later, I get kind of what I feel like is my big break, the thing that really kind of takes the conversation global. And I wrote this article and was super lucky to have Smashing Magazine publish it. They had 1 million readers back then, and the conversation goes global. Right now I get an opportunity to tell my story on stages. I get to tell it in pretty much anywhere anybody will listen. I'm practicing in tweets, in short form, in long form, in video, in email, in all of these different channels, just to learn how to tell the story and where it resonates. I briefly considered doing Lean UX, the musical. Thankfully, we backed off of that very quickly, decided not to do Lean UX, the musical. but you never know. There's, you know, maybe one day we'll get to it. And so the question becomes, right, why did my story resonate? Why did, when I planted my flag and I started telling the story, why did it resonate? And it resonated, look, I was solving a real problem for people. And that's what you do at work. You solve real problems for people. That helps build your story. I had actual real world experience. So I wasn't an academic. I was doing the work, and I continue to do the work, and I share that, right? I don't just share the wins. I shared the losses. I shared a lot of losses about where we screwed this up and how we got it wrong. And that shows humility. And most importantly, I think I always try to provide practical, tactical advice. You're even seeing it here now in this presentation. And that, I believe, helped me build an authentic connection, right? So we planted our flag, we're telling our story. Now, the amazing thing that happens is that new paths start to open up as you start to tell your story to more and more people. The interesting thing for me, as I was terrified about not being able to do good design work, I was actually ending up doing less and less design work because I was doing this all the time. I was on airplanes, traveling around, teaching people Lean UX, speaking about it at conferences and that type of thing, not doing design work. Now, the interesting thing is that new paths open up as you start to do that. Book publishers go to conferences, they look for people who are talking about the latest topics. And I got offered a book deal to write Lean UX. And again, remember that self-confidence and that entrepreneurial spirit? I said, sure, I'll jump in, except there's one big problem with all that, or one big secret I didn't tell O'Reilly, the publisher at the time, which was I didn't know how to write a book at all. I had no idea. I'd never written anything longer than 750 words, right? But I was feeling entrepreneurial. I had that self-confidence. I wanted to reinvent. And so I jumped forward, right? And people say, well, that's really lucky. And I agree. It's very lucky, but I was prepared for that opportunity, right? I was ready to make that leap when it came along. And I think that's something you have to consider as these new paths open up, is to jump in and say, like the circus or writing a book, you know, what the heck, I'm going to do it. Now, look, it's not all sunshine and roses, as I said before. It took me 2 years, 3 editors, and 4 manuscripts. I wrote Lean UX 4 times completely before O'Reilly agreed to publish it, which gave me an opportunity to talk about it for 2 years, but it was brutal. I didn't know if it was ever going to see the light of day. 5 years after my 35th birthday, not long after my 40th birthday, Lean UX goes live, and it changes everything, and it starts to continue to change what I do for a living. Most importantly, I realized that now I was a teacher. I was teaching in everything that I was doing, workshops and conferences and webinars and podcasts and guest articles and interviews. And when you do all of this stuff, I say yes to everything. And I've been saying yes to everything for a long time. You learn how to teach this material. You improve your storytelling. You understand what's resonating, where the jokes land, where they don't land, and it makes you better at the area where you've planted your flag. And then the last thing I learned, and this came really from, again, this is the last thing I learned, the most recent thing I've learned is this: give it all away. It really felt counterintuitive to me and to a lot of folks. I think it feels counterintuitive. I make almost everything I do freely available, right? If you go to my website, my keynotes are there, the articles are there, templates are there. Download it all, give it all away for free, right? Make it easily findable and accessible. And what happens is it comes back to you, right? If you go there right now, you can watch keynotes that I've given at major conferences around the world, and you don't have to hire me to give those keynotes. And yet people still do that. They say, hey, we saw that video. We want you to come in and do that. It's amazing what comes back when you give your stuff out for free. And you know, you start to build your community locally, like the stuff we're doing now. You improve your material and you're building those connections around the world, and you're giving back to the community. Now, look, as I wrap this up and I take your questions, there's a few things to remember. Staying relevant in wherever you plant your flag. If you want to stay relevant in that domain, you have to stay active. You have to have a presence in conversation, in the work, in participation, contributions to the work, etc. If you think that you'd like to reinvent yourself and move on to a new topic, my experience has been that you can start to build that up over a couple of years. Like trying to take a sharp right turn or a sharp left turn is really difficult to pull off. I'm trying to do a lot more work in the human resources space. And I've been building up my credentials in that space because I don't have any human resources credentials. I've been building that up for the last 18 months, and I'm finally starting to see some traction there. Look, ultimately, this is my story. There's lots of paths. There are many other ways to get there. This is what worked for me. But what I always try to remember as I move forward and do this is that is this Bezos quote, where he talks about in the long term, right? What's always going to be true? What's never going to change? Right? People ask him what's going to change, and he talks about, I don't care about what's going to change. I care about what's never going to change. What's always going to be true? What are people always going to need? And how can you service that? And I think that if you think about that and think about how you can provide that kind of value for the long term, it can really help make you kind of build that forever employable aspect to your career, right? So that's the talk, and those are my slides. Before we jump into anything else, I did want to share one thing. I'd love to give away 2 free copies of the book. It's not out yet in print, but when it comes out, I'd love to give away 2 free copies of the book to you folks for being here. If you'd like to kind of enter the drawing for the books itself, I just dropped a link in the chat. If you could just fill out that form, you enter the drawing, and we'll give away 2 free books. And then the only other thing, last promo thing I'll say is, if you want the slides from the talk, just go to jeffgothelf.com/slides and I'll hook you up. So with that, I'm happy to stop talking for a second and see what kind of questions you have.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jeff, for this very inspiring talk. If I might be a little bit selfish, I have a first question, which I'm thinking about for a long time. Is, you talked about placing the flag,
yeah,
right? Mm-hmm. So the question, I guess, or I assume for many people here is, but where is my flag?
Yeah.
Do I need to find it? Is it already there? Do I have to create a new flag? A question to you first, and I would also like to know how Tom was dealing with it. So how did you find your flag? Please tell us a little bit more about that.
So I'll give you the formula that I've started to think about putting together, and then I'd love to hear Tom's story as well. For me, it's a Venn diagram with 3 circles to think about where to plant my flag or where to plant your flag. Circle number 1 is your expertise and experience and your personal passions. So what are you good at work? What do you know really well, right? Where do you believe you can really add value professionally? But I would also add your personal passions and the things that you really love outside of work as well in there. For example, you saw that I used to play in bands, and I'm a piano player. When I lived in the US, I had a collection of vintage electric pianos. And so I happen to know a stupid amount of information about vintage electric pianos, right? So that goes in that circle, right? But it's part of the thing that I might be able to add value on, right? So who knows? So experience and expertise. The second circle, trends. So what are the trends, right? The things that are how is the world trending, and what are those things that are always going to be kind of forever true? So technological trends, political trends, consumer behavior, consumer consumption trends, geopolitical trends, pandemics, right? That type of thing. And then the last circle is target audience, right? Who do you want to talk to? Who do you think you could help? Who do you think you can provide real value to? And where those 3 circles meet, you're going to find a couple of options that can help you kind of narrow down the choices about where you might ultimately end up planting your flag. So that's the formula that I talk about in the book, and that's kind of the way that I've thought about it for a while now.
Great. I believe that passion is really a huge part of it. I just want to share quickly one experience from my side, because I did a coaching session last year, and I asked my coach exactly about this. So actually creating a vision for myself and treating myself like a product, this really resonated with me, as you put this on the third slide, that you actually have to see yourself as the product.
Yeah.
One interesting thing the coach said to me, well, if you want to find your passion and where you're really good at, just go for a walk, a long walk, run a lot and forget about thinking. And then when you come back, write down all the cool projects you have done in your whole life since you have been a little child. And I was like, okay, but I'm looking for the professional thing, right? And she said, I don't care, it's all connected. And this is where I personally finally found my passion, which is in innovating products and going into new things, at least as I figured out that I was already doing this when I was 14 years old or so. So I can highly recommend also to you guys, if you want to find your passion, just look at what you have done all your life and you will find patterns, right? Okay, but I want to pass it on to Tom. What is your, how did you find your flag?
I think my experience tracks very well with Jeff's and kind of the advice that he's given. So I'm gonna say something that is sort of exactly what he's already gone through, but just in a slightly different way in terms of the way that I think about it, because it tracks very closely. And that is a couple of things. One is just to say yes to opportunities. I think that was probably the biggest factor for me, is that when people would come to me and say, hey, could you do this thing? I didn't stop to think about if I could, or if I had time, or if it was going to pay. I just said yes, because I wanted to support other people. I wanted to be a part of the community. And that is ultimately what led to a lot of opportunities for me. But also just being curious. You know, I've spent, I love to spend time just meeting new people, talking to them, having meetings, going to coffee. For someone, I have no idea if they have a job available, if they're even in a role where they could hire someone. I just enjoy meeting other people and engaging people in relationships and conversations. And that has always led to every job, client work, internal team role that I've ever had, just by being curious and wanting to be a part of the community and participate in a conversation.
And how would you approach this right now, since meeting people for coffee takes a bit more logistics and effort?
You know, I have had more good online coffee meetings with people in the last 6 weeks than I ever would have had. So prior to this, I would meet people in the geographic area where I live in the United States, which is actually pretty limited. And since everyone is working from home right now, everyone that I reach out to, I'm like, hey, you're in Europe. Do you want to find a time to get together and have coffee? And everyone, people that I probably would actually have a difficult time meeting in person. Because when I travel, I will frequently just like ring up whoever I'm connected to in San Francisco and be like, hey, I'm going to be in San Francisco. You want to get together for lunch, right? Never met this person in my life. They would probably say no. But in this environment, people seem much more open to doing that sort of thing these days.
That's really cool.
Sorry, I don't want to make a long comment.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say that in my company, we're actually doing the same. And I think it's great to have I think it's great the quality of the meetups that we have with like a short coffee break, or for example, seeing you guys present something like this is just, it's mind-blowing, the changes that we are living through right now with the Corona crisis. So yeah, thank you for that.
Awesome. Nice. I have a question from the audience to Jeff, which was really neat. We had this earlier. How do you manage your day job while you are creating something that might be forever employable, right? So all this content, and it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah, it's a ton of work, and it's again kind of the suddenly remote nature of our work. I mean, it was a lot of it was remote to begin with, but you know, I came back from a trip to Paris in the first week of March. It was like March 8th or March 9th, and I haven't left the house since then. And what's really interesting is that I have in the last 2 months, it's been really difficult I feel like I've been incredibly busy trying to juggle exactly that: the content creation, the work, the delivery of the work. There's business development. There's this kind of stuff, participation in events, and it's been hectic. I've been super busy and doing a lot of time in this chair that's hard to see with this virtual background, right? 10 to 12 hours a day. What was kind of interesting is that before the pandemic, since I was traveling so much, I actually had one of the things that, as much as I was getting burned out on travel, I actually looked forward to the disconnected time on the airplane, because that was my creative time, and that I took advantage of that. And something like a lot of my trips are short, but recently I've picked up a client in India, and I was traveling to India on a monthly basis, and that's a lovely 8-hour flight, not terribly long from here, but a perfect amount of time to really kind of heads down, put your headphones on, and be creative. So I was looking for those opportunities where I had that disconnected time, because it's very, very difficult, I agree, to manage the delivery of work, the development of work, the creation of any content like book writing or blogs or videos or whatever it is. And then of course, family, right? Family, which is super important to me, and kind of the primary motivation for all of this. I try to be very clear about when my day ends, so that I can go spend time with my family. And if I don't get everything done, the good news for me, I guess, is that I'm a morning person. My family isn't so much. Certainly my teenagers are not morning people. And so I can get up early and knock out a bunch of stuff before everybody wakes up, and I'm okay with that. So really, and it's been that way since I started writing Lean UX. It's been that way. It's kind of borrowing 45 minutes on the commute to New York City, a couple of hours on a plane, a night in at a hotel while I'm traveling, 2 hours in the morning before everybody gets up. That's how it's literal juggling. That's exactly the right verb. It's juggling.
Would you say that you kind of like made this content creation a habit? Like, like a habit, like when you have nothing to do, and then people just put out their iPhone and go to Facebook or do some stuff that for you is natural, that as soon as you have downtime, you grab your computer and write an article or something. Would you treat it like a habit?
Yeah, it's exactly right. It's a habit, and it's on a cadence. So for any, like, for example, I write a monthly blog post. Now, for me, that feels like a reasonable commitment, right? I see people put out podcasts every 2 weeks. I'm super impressed. And anybody, I get Jerry McGovern's email. He writes every Sunday, 1,000 words, which is just mind blowing to me. But yeah, so for me, yeah, there's a kind of a permanent item in my to-do list, in my backlog, that's, this month's newsletter, right? This month's newsletter and article, and that is something that I do on a regular basis. So that always gets done. The books seem to happen on roughly a 2-year cadence or so. At least I start them roughly about a 2-year cadence. So I was about due for one, so that made sense. But yeah, it's definitely a habit. And it's a thing. It's work, right? It's part of I see it as part of my job, and so I feel like I'm not doing my job if I don't do it.
I have another question from the audience. How do you suggest the audience to do as the first step to build the future business?
Yes. So I think the thing you kind of have to at least decide, and you don't have to commit to it, right? One of a lot of the product thinking stuff I've been talking about forever is in this book, and it's applied to de-risking where you've planted your flag. So let's say you do that exercise that I told you about, right? And you decide, I'm going to plant my flag. I'm going to talk to, I'm going to talk to product managers about how to kind of be the best agile product manager you can be, right? And something like that, right? You might, before you go all in on that, you're going to want to de-risk that. You want to run experiments, right? And the experiments are going to be small chunks of work that give you some kind of insight about whether or not you're finding your target audience, your content is resonating, and you're starting to build that platform. So the smallest thing I can think of that you could do is tweet, right? 280 characters, right? Start tweeting, right? See if you can engage people. See if you can jump into conversations with folks and engage them on the topic that you believe you're an expert at. If you start to find some things that are resonating, you can start to scale that up from a tweet to a blog post, from a blog post to maybe a Medium article with 1,000 words, right? If that goes well, maybe it becomes a talk. And if that goes well, right, who knows? Maybe it becomes a book at some point. But start small, run lots of little experiments so you can find how to articulate yourself, how to best tell your story, which target audience is going to resonate the most with your story, what vocabulary you should use. And again, tweeting is free, right? Blogging is free. Making little videos and dropping them on LinkedIn is free. All of those things are experiments for you to start to test what story to tell, who to tell it to, and whether or not it's resonating. And look, all of this is UX and product design, right? You're helping a target audience solve a real problem with a value that you're providing, and you're measuring whether or not you're actually hitting that target audience with behavior change, right? Are they behaving differently? Do they respond to you? Do they follow you? Do they share your work, right? Those are all things you can measure.
I would like to, because this is kind of related to what you were talking about, launch a poll. Jeff forwarded to me before the session, and it's about what's keeping you from writing a blog post, actually. So what are the things which holding you back right now? And I launched this poll right now for you guys. So I think that would be interesting to figure out what are things which potentially are holding you back. I see votes coming in already. I think that the first thing in order to get started is actually to find out what is holding you back.
Absolutely.
I really had a nice dialogue with my coach back then, and the coach then asked me one simple question, because I said I don't think I have time for that, and then he said, or he asked me, okay, Thomas, but what are you doing instead?
Right.
Think about it. What are you doing instead of writing?
Yeah.
And I was like, shoot, that's the perfect question. And I came up with a lot of stuff which I was doing instead, which was just stupid.
Put down the Nintendo Switch controller and turned off Animal Crossing.
So I want to share the results. Okay, most of the people, almost half, said don't know what to write about.
Yeah.
And again, Jeff, maybe some advice from your side.
Yeah. So look, don't know what to write about. So this I mentioned this briefly, kind of in the blazing fast version of the talk that I gave. Here's the thing. I recently went back and tried to find the first blog post I ever wrote, and I think I found it, and I wrote it 17 years ago, in 2003. And it was a comparison of two wireframing tools, HTML wireframes versus Visio wireframes. Okay, it gives you a sense of the time frame that we're talking about, right? 17 years ago. 17 years ago in 2003, everything about UX design had already been written, is what it felt like. And yet look how much stuff has been written since then, right? The thing that you should write about is your expertise grounded in your story and in your experience, because that's the one thing nobody else has and nobody else has ever written. Your career path is unique. Your background is unique. Your job experiences are unique. So share that. People want to hear a variety of different points of view on how to get better at their job or at a skill or at a hobby or whatever it is. And so if you don't know what to write about, tell one of your stories. In my super fast presentation, I began to tell you at least 5 different stories about myself, right? I toured in bands. I can tell you 1,000 stories about that. I was in the circus. I've got 1 million stories from there that I can share, right? And look, that helps start to build some kind of a conversation, right? So whatever you've done, start writing about that. Look, you know, there's and it's going to take practice to figure out the right channel, the format, the vocabulary to get it to resonate. I remember listening to a talk one time by Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vaynerchuk, very successful marketer, content marketer these days. He started off by taking his family's wine business online, and he made videos about wine on YouTube for a year that nobody watched, right? So he was basically screaming into the ether for a year, right? But perfecting his delivery, finding that vocabulary, seeing what resonates, and continuing to improve and get that better, and telling his story. And then that, of course, resonated and grew, right? So that's the thing is I would focus on what you know and what you've done and write that, because no one else can do that. And that's what you have.
And one thing I would like to add on this, because I also was on this journey, and a marketing consultant actually told me, me as a person who's doing a lot of research in order to find out, like, what is the key target customer, what are their main pains, blah, 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 blah. And then he asked me, like, well, who is the target audience? Talk to the people you have served before and ask them what kind of pain they had and why they hired you, in order to understand it. And the funny thing is, it was so obvious, and sometimes things are so obvious, but we still don't see them. So I would like to take this discussion in general about where's our flag, where's actually our value proposition, into a breakout session again, to kind of like wrap it up a little bit and talk about it in group discussions. I will recreate 10 rooms for us guys, and we will spend 7 minutes in a group discussion, and then we will be back here in the room, and then we can wrap up today. So see you soon in 7 minutes, and let's discuss where actually is our flag, and help each other in some peer coaching. So see you soon.
Awesome. Hi.
Hello again.
Hello again.
Excellent. Everyone is back.
Doop. Okay.
I had some very good conversations.
Me too.
Did you guys end up in the same room?
Yeah. I have a feeling everyone is kind of on the path somehow already, but no one.
So basically thinking about what's next, like I transitioned out of my own startup. And then I just went back to freelance right now to basically because it's something I need to make a living basically. And on the other side, it's something where I can explore different opportunities. So I'm kind of open for hire. Oh,
okay. Say, Richard, you're sharing this with everyone right now, but
it's all good.
But the only thing that we know that he's ready for hire.
Yeah, you popped the most important sentence.
He's ready for hire.
What is his profession? Richard, what's your profession?
Too shy to talk now. But maybe we can continue that in the Slack channel later on.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so this meetup, this virtual meetup has come to an end. It was a pleasure to have you all here. One quick poll in the end to figure out, at least with the rest of you guys who are still here, how well was your time spent today? So rated from 1 to 5, waste of time till very well. That would be nice.
We'll see if anyone whose waste of time it was is still here.
I should have done it earlier, right?
Oh yes, there
half of people already left, so we have the core.
Maybe you didn't pull them back from the breakouts.
Yeah, it felt like it because there were about 70 before going into breakout rooms.
Yeah. This is what I experienced from last time. Breakout rooms are a nice excuse to, how's it say, like in Philipp ein Polnischen machen?
Polish exit.
The Polish exit?
As a Polish person, I resent that.
Yes, please.
No, actually, I had a Russian colleague, and the Russian colleague said they are doing an Englishman.
Yes,
so
an English exit. Yes, that's
an English exit for the Russians. It's an English exit. For Germans, it's a Polish exit. I don't know what.
Let's just say they left earlier out of frustration.
For the Brazilians, it's a French exit.
French exit. Okay. Anyways, let's blame it on the French.
French people here to make a sense.
So so I want to end the poll and now share the result. Can you see the result?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. There are 3 people who, so 60% voted a 5, that's great, 30 a 4, and 3 people voted a 3. Can you quickly speak up? What made it a 3? That would be really interesting to improve.
You can also leave us anonymous messages somehow.
Yeah.
Or anonymous message? Oh, come on. No? Okay.
For me, I saw both live, Jeff Gothelf and Tom Greever, so it's not really something new for me, that's the thing.
Okay.
Not about the event, I'm talking about the content.
Okay, about the content. Anyone else out of those 3 who said only a 3 out of 5? What is missing to make it a 5 next time?
I mean, I chose 4. This is the first time I've ever been in such a big remote event. Thanks for that. I thought in the beginning of the event there was, it's maybe cruel of me to say 4, but some time passed talking. Are we doing this? What are we doing now? You know, I see Tom there, and I expect him to talk right away, sort of. But yeah, maybe it's also about me to be so excited.
Okay, so I just take a look at the clock. Usually, from my experience and talking also to other organizers, they say that in a virtual world, the attention span is much shorter than in the real world. So we were cutting it down to a 1.5, or like, yeah, exceeded a little bit the 1.5 hour time period. But I think I would say let's call it a day, or let's call it a night, however you want to see it. I just leave a link here to support us if you want. The UX and Product Meetup in Munich, and also the product people have a donation page on Eventbrite. So if you like what we were doing here and you want to support us in the future, just leave a tip. That would be cool. Yeah, that's it from my side. Or does anyone want to have the last word? Then speak now.
Thank you for coming. I hope I'll see you again soon.
Yeah.
Was a pleasure.
Thanks for organizing.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff
you.
and Tom, for your great
Very
talk.
much. It was
Always a
so
pleasure.
much fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah, let's speak all together at the same time.
Words.
Thank you very
Don't break
much.
Zoom.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Yes.
Good night.
Amazing.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye.
Good night. So let's see who will stay here. I will stay till the end.
Richard.
Challenge accepted.
So probably Richard is still open for employee.
No, it's like
No, aren't you?
let's get our breakout room back, Luke. Let's stick around and wait until we get it back.
Well, get it back. Yeah, let's get it back. Just wondering about your journey, to be honest. Or you want to take it a different room as well? It's also fine. Or no.
Get a room, you two.
Hey.
You're jealous.
Virtual one. You can have your own one.
Oh, no problem.
So now that everybody has
Also
left,
so
let's share the secret knowledge.
Thomas, I wanted to say something. I feel super bad because in the last breakout session that we do have Tom Greever in it, and then there was this Monica which only had a 4 out of like 5 points.
Yeah.
And I felt like bad, like maybe she just wanted to talk to him, like you know what I mean?
Maybe.
Did I get her right that she was unhappy that she couldn't talk with him? Or didn't?
I don't know. But at least the thing is, what I really like about the breakout session is that you have the chance to actually speak to the speaker, and just randomly you're in the space with Tom Greever. Hello. I was not in this place, but let's see.
I wish I speak to Tom, but I was speaking to Jeff.
No,
that's not the point.
Poor guy.
Okay, guys. I really have to close this thing, shut this thing down now, because my family requires the attention.
All right. Thanks for co-organizing. It was great. I really loved the breakout session and the structure. So see you. Let's do another one.
Yeah. When is the next one?
For us, we have one on the 12th. It's more of the usual structure and growth. So yeah, looking forward. So let's catch up out of the Zoom.
Yes.
All right.
And the UX product will think about it. We haven't thought about it yet, but probably more or less soon.
All right. Good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Soon live.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Ciao.
Eric? Wow. Okay.